You're going to think this is sour grapes, and to some it might be, but the NCAA's selective enforcement is laughable. And it's the reason this organization probably needs to die and it needs to fail. And I've been a big proponent of what they could do. I just don't think they will anymore. Anyway, we'll talk about it after this.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day is Charles Stackhouse. Coming up, Jeffrey Rush is Sunday. Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is an extra edition of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. And we're talking about Tennessee's NCAA ruling that was just released. And for normally an Ole Miss person talking about a Tennessee ruling, it would come across hollow. But the selective enforcement that the NCAA is doing is absolutely a problem, and it needs to be dealt with. And I honestly think that the NCAA owes Ole Miss an apology. I think the NCAA owes Ole Miss a couple of games, maybe a couple early season games against Hawaii should go on the schedule as well, because the 2-year bowl ban, it is tough to be the school where they don't do that anymore, because apparently they don't do a bowl ban anymore. But Tennessee has brought back hundreds of violations over the last couple of years. This is what the NCAA site said. Hundreds of violations occurred in Tennessee football over 3 seasons. Okay, so that right there should tell you that they should not get less penalties than Ole Miss got. Okay? We're talking about how you need to distribute penalties equally. Okay? They had impermissible paid minutes. They basically ignored the official visit rule that was in place. Direct payments to prospects, student athletes, and families, plural. We had the thing where they were just putting cash in McDonald's bags and giving it to players. The head coach got a show cause of 6 years. If you were going to do this, Hugh Freeze should have probably got a show cause for about that same amount. Unethical conduct, failure to monitor, exemplary cooperation, which probably means that they had the money to grease the right palms. It's at the point where I just want to call this a corrupt organization, whether it is or it isn't. I just want to do that because this is absolutely ridiculous. Now, they're going on 5 years probation, but I do want to let you know this one penalty. This is where you got them. During the 2023-24 academic year, so that is this year, so if Tennessee goes to a bowl game, they shall forego the purchase of advertising with all football postseason broadcast in which it is a participant. So instead of a bowl ban, they got a bowl ban advertising ban. So they just can't talk about whatever bowl they go to. You can go to whatever bowl you want to. You can play in the national championship game. You just can't advertise it at all. It's absolutely stupid. Hundreds of violations, like 18 level 1 violations and failure to monitor, and they did not get a bowl ban. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's something you don't even think about that it's even possible. Ole Miss got 2 years for a disputed Leo Lewis purchase cash thing that happened out that was done by the school's rival, and players like deer hunting on another booster's land, or a player sleeping on a coach's couch when he first got to school. It is such an example of unequal enforcement. It is absolutely ridiculous. The NCAA should be ashamed of themselves. The NCAA should absolutely be ashamed of what they are doing. They should be ashamed of how they enforce it, because at this point you have to wonder, what does this organization mean? What is it good for, honestly? And we'll talk about that in just a second. But first, I do want to let you know the show is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is the perfect fit. And it's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure that every part fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check mark to check how the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only, and exclusions apply. All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Everydayers later on the show, weekend, I guess, Jeffrey Rush will be on the show. We're working to get Charles Stackhouse as well. So this is a weird episode because in most cases, a show about Tennessee getting violence would not prompt an Ole Miss related video. But when you look at the two cases and how they were handled and the vitriol that came on one side but not the other, it is absolutely understandable. Remember, Tennessee is the place where Dan Wolken offered to help out the AD in order to get public sentiment on his time, basically agreed to be a propaganda guy. This is one of the guys that just tooth and nail wanted to bury Ole Miss sports. And, Pat Forty, all the usual suspects. You didn't hear anything about this, despite how severe this recruitment and these violations were, and how thumbing your nose at the system it was. It's just an unheard of thing. Now, Ole Miss, like I said, NCAA deserves Ole Miss an apology. The NCAA deserves to give back vacated wins. The NCAA deserves, they should give back vacated wins, I should say, and they should give them 2 games. The games that were a bowl ban, Ole Miss should get those games back somehow. 2 games with Hawaii at the beginning of the season over the next 10 years would probably cover it. Because this selective enforcement thing is a problem, and it's the reason the NCAA has become such an ineffective governing body. And they have the ability to do everything to be an effective governing body within enforcement and eligibility and all of this stuff. They have the tools at their benefit. The O'Bannon case just scared the hell out of them. Honestly. Whenever they lost a case, kind of viewed their own mortality. It's been a slippery slope ever since. And now at this point, they're just not an effective governing body. I have now at this point no confidence that they can even manage the muster or the strength to deal with the NIL situation. They're just going to kick the can down the road. It's like, well, we just didn't get the federal legislation we were hoping for. And I don't know if anything can be done. So we just have to, hey, can we have more money for advertised revenue for the NCAA tournament? Thank you. Stuff like that. It is honestly a situation that was a terrible droopy dog impression. Once again, I'm aging myself. But it was pretty awful. But it's just one of those things. I literally cannot stand the NCAA. I can't. They serve a purpose. They get to be the boogeyman. Heck, they got to be the boogeyman in this video. But the SEC and the Big Ten will never create an organization to self-govern because they get to point to the boogeyman and talk about how it is broken. It's like, yeah, the NCAA is just a mess. I don't know what we're going to do. It's absolutely weird. It's terrible. But they don't want to drop the money on enforcement. They don't want to actually deal with this stuff that they have to deal with. They just want to point at it. It's like, yep, that's broken. There's nothing we can do about that. We can run our ship the best way we can. But honestly, what do you expect to happen? The big losers today, okay? And until the NCAA proves otherwise, which they won't, because the joke from back in the 80s is Kentucky basketball made the NCAA so angry that they put Cleveland State on 3 years probation. That is a joke from 50 years ago. And we're still having selective enforcement problems now. So if you're Ole Miss, if you're Mississippi State, if you're Arkansas, South Carolina, those schools, be worried because your scalp is probably the one they're going to come after and put up on the wall. They won't do it to these wealthier schools for whatever reason. Read into that whatever you want to do. But they won't come after them. They won't do anything to them. They will save it, and whenever they can get you, they will hammer you to the wall for a player sleeping on a couch, for a player hunting on a booster's property. But they won't do a dang thing about stealing from a children's cancer charity or thousands of dollars in McDonald's bags being handed to players. Blatant disregard for the actual rules. They're only mad about it if there's nothing they can get from it. But whenever they need to get a scalp, whenever they need to get that scalp, you've got the schools like Ole Miss State, Arkansas, South Carolina, probably in the Big Ten, Illinois, Minnesota. Those schools, those middle tier schools in the conference, they're going to do that because it doesn't affect their pocketbook. It just doesn't. It's at the point where I just believe what I believe at this point. The NCAA over and over again has proven how ineffectual they are as a ruling body and that they just shouldn't be taken seriously. I'm a little bit angry about it. I'm not necessarily angry about Tennessee. Tennessee got away with it, just like LSU. They got away with it. I'm not really mad at the school. I'm mad about the selective enforcement. And that is the biggest problem and has been the biggest problem for the NCAA for years. Just kind of is what it is. Anyway, later on this weekend, we will have Jeffrey Rush. We got Brian Smith coming on tomorrow. Today, I'm going to Hollywood Studios, to Indiana Jones and the Den of Destiny, to see actual props from the movie and all that stuff because I'm a little bit of a nerd. They have a little pop-up at Hollywood Studios. I'm going to go check in and see that. Later on tonight at like 10 o'clock, the Tigers play the Seattle Mariners. Going to watch that. So it's going to lead into a nice weekend. I wanted to take a little bit of time off before SEC Media Days because when it's time to go, it is time to go. Anyway, I hope everybody has a great weekend. And of course, hotty toddy.